Hi, it's Megan. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 4 fall baking recipes. I have a pumpkin caramel poke cake, I have applesauce bread, pumpkin muffins, and applesauce spice cake. You can check the description box for the recipe links, and let's get started. The dessert I'm making today is pumpkin caramel poke cake with a caramel cream frosting. So it looks like it's a lot of ingredients, but there's kind of 3 different steps. The first step is to make the cake part, and for that you're going to need, I guess I'll start up here. We'll need oil, sugar, flour, 1 can of pumpkin puree, vanilla, baking soda, brown sugar, 2 eggs, and then we'll need cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, baking powder, and salt. And then while that's cooking, you're going to make a caramel sauce. Okay, for the caramel sauce, you're going to need milk, butter, and brown sugar. And then for the whipped topping, you're going to need heavy whipping cream, half a block of cream cheese, and some toffee bits to go on top. So let's start by putting the cake together. Okay, so here I am just making the base for the cake. I'm going to start out by adding my can of pumpkin, and then I'm going to add in the sugar and the brown sugar. And then next I'm going to add in the oil and my eggs as well. And then I am going to mix all of those ingredients together until they are well combined. And then after all those wet ingredients are together, I'm going to start adding in my dry ingredients. So I have baking powder and baking soda. I use my sifter because my baking powder and baking soda are kind of clumpy. So I just use that to make sure there's no clumps. And then I added in my cinnamon, vanilla, and salt, as well as my ginger. And then I'm just going to mix in those dry ingredients as well until they are nice and incorporated. Then I'm going to add in the flour and get that mixed in as well. You don't want to overmix it, otherwise it can make it kind of dry, but just until there's no more dry streaks. And then I'm going to pour it out into my 9x13 pan and bake it at 350 for about 35 minutes. And this ended up being a really, really good cake. We all really enjoyed it. So here's how you make the homemade caramel that's going to go inside the cake. So while the cake's baking, you're going to take your milk, brown sugar, and butter, slowly heat it up until everything is melted and combined. Then you're going to boil it for 2 minutes without stirring. That's very important. And then you're just going to let it cool down. Once your cake has come out and cooled slightly, you're going to poke holes in it and then drizzle the caramel all over the top to give it time to soak in. And then while that's finishing cooling, you can make your whipped cream. So you are going to whip your caramel sauce and some of the whipping cream together. And you're just going to slowly start to incorporate it, whipping it faster and faster until it gets nice and thick, like a kind of pretty thick whipped cream. And then you can just pour that over the top of your fully cooled cake. Don't do it while the cake is any kind of warmth at all, or else your whipped cream will just completely melt. So I like using this offset spatula. It makes frosting cakes so much easier. Definitely not necessary, but even though I don't make cakes that often, I am so glad that I have these. So I'll make sure to link these down below, as well as some of the other tools that I'm using today, and also all the recipes that I'm cooking today. I'll make sure are linked down in the description box below. So after you have spread out all of the topping, the frosting, whipped cream, whatever you want to call it, and then you are going to top it with the Heath chips. I just had like half a bag left over in my pantry, so I just kind of started to sprinkle those on the top. This was one of my favorite parts of the whole cake. It gives some good like crunch and texture to it, so it's not just all soft and fluffy. But this was a winner. Definitely will be making it again. Here's what you're going to need to make the applesauce cinnamon bread. You're going to need a neutral flavored oil, some no sugar added applesauce, vanilla, nutmeg, cinnamon, some eggs. You're also going to need brown sugar and sugar. If you want to make this a little bit healthier, you can use monk fruit sweetener in replace of the sugar. And then if you want to make it even more healthier, you can add sub monk fruit sweetener for the brown sugar and add a little bit of molasses. You're also going to need flour. The recipe calls for whole wheat flour. I might not have enough of it, so I will sub some white flour, and I've also made it with all white flour before, and it's been very good. You're also going to need baking soda, baking powder, salt, and then either sour cream or buttermilk. So this is
Definitely a family favorite. I make it a lot for breakfast. I also make it just for snacks. So to start off, you're going to add your oil and your eggs together, and you're going to incorporate those until they are nice and homogeneous. And then from there, you are going to add in your sugar and brown sugar, your vanilla, and your sour cream or buttermilk. I used sour cream today. And then you're also going to add in your 1 cup of applesauce. And then you're going to mix all of those kind of wet ingredients together until they are nice and combined. And then from there, you are going to add in your dry ingredients. So you're going to add in your flour. I did a mix of whole wheat and just regular white flour. And then again, I am sifting my baking powder and baking soda so that they're not clumpy, adding in the 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. If you want it really cinnamony, you can add even more. And then I also sifted my nutmeg because it also had a little bit of clumps in it. So then I'm just going to stir in my dry ingredients, again, just until there are no dry streaks and everything is nice and combined, but don't overmix it. Then I'm going to add in some cinnamon chips. I just had half a bag of these left over in my pantry, so I just decided to add them in today. Definitely not necessary, but they are kind of a fun addition. And then I'm just going to add it into my loaf pan and cook it for about an hour at a 350 degree oven. And then here's what it looks like after it has come out and has cooled. Then I'm going to just slice it up, and it stores really well just in a bag on the counter. You can also freeze it really well too.
Here's what you need to make pumpkin chocolate chip muffins. You are going to need 1 2/3 cup of flour. You can sub whole wheat flour if you want to. You're also going to need 1 cup of sugar. If you are making these and wanting to have them be a little bit healthier or to have them for breakfast, you can also substitute sugar for monk fruit sweetener. You're also going to need 1 tablespoon of pumpkin pie spice, and then 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt, and you're also going to need 1 cup of pumpkin. You can also use the whole can. I just have this partially opened can from a different recipe that I made, so I'm just going to use whatever's left of here. You're going to need half a cup of softened butter, 2 eggs, and then 1 cup of chocolate chips. I'm going to use the mini chocolate chips today.
So these pumpkin chocolate chip muffins are definitely one of the easiest recipes. They're super good, always a winner. And something I like about this muffin recipe is that you can just add all of your ingredients together in one bowl. You don't have to do wet and then dry and then mix them together. So I've just added all of the ingredients here into my bowl, and then I'm going to just start mixing them all together after I add in my eggs and my butter. My butter kind of softened weird. So parts of it were super soft and like melty, and other parts were not quite soft enough. So you'll see butter chunks in my batter, but they all ended up cooking just fine. So next time I would just make sure that my butter is kind of evenly softened throughout. And then you're just going to mix them, again, mixing until there's no dry streaks. And then I'm adding in my mini chocolate chips. You can also add chocolate chunks or just regular chocolate chips. I have one kid that doesn't love chocolate chips, so I added the mini ones so that my kid who does like chocolate chips still gets the chocolate, but my kid who doesn't like the chocolate chips isn't offended by the amount of chocolate in them. So here I am just putting them in my silicone muffin tin. I love this thing. It makes cooking muffins and cupcakes super duper easy. And this recipe actually ended up making about 16 muffins. So it does make a few more than the dozen that it called for. So here's what they look like. Nice and fresh out of the oven. They are very delicious and have a really good texture, and they're not overly dense like some pumpkin recipes can be.
Okay, here's what you need for applesauce spice cake with brown butter cream cheese frosting. You are going to need some unsweetened applesauce, a neutral flavored oil, a couple eggs, vanilla. For your spices, you're going to need nutmeg, ginger, allspice, and cinnamon. You're also going to need baking powder, salt, and baking soda. You're also going to need brown sugar, regular sugar, and flour. That's all for the cake part of the recipe. And then for the frosting part of the recipe, you are going to need some milk, powdered sugar, cream cheese, butter, and vanilla as well.
So this is what my daughter requested for her birthday cake for this year. So definitely a very delicious fall cake. If you like the boxed mix spice cakes, you're definitely going to like this homemade version. So again, I'm just starting out by mixing my oil and my eggs together, getting them nice and combined, then adding in my applesauce, as well as my sugar and brown sugar and vanilla. Then I'm just going to, again, mix it all together until everything is nice and combined. And then from there, I'm going to add in my dry ingredients. So I'm going to add in my flour and my cinnamon, and then my baking soda and baking powder, sifting them so that they aren't clumpy. And then I'm going to add in my salt. And then I also decided to sift the rest of my spices. So my ginger, nutmeg, and allspice, because they were a little bit on the clumpy side. So I just sifted those in so that there wouldn't be giant clumps of those spices in a bite of the cake. And then again, I'm just mixing until everything is combined, trying to get rid of all the dry streaks, but not over mixing so that it doesn't get too tough. Then I'm going to pour it into my cake pan. And again, I'm just going to bake this at a 350 oven for about 35 minutes. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than that, but this is definitely a very delicious cake that everyone in my family likes, and I've made it for company before, and everyone really likes it. While that is cooking and cooling, you can make the frosting. So I used the original recipe calls for 3 ounces of cream cheese. I used 4 just because I'm more likely to use a half block of cream cheese in a recipe than I am. It's like, I don't know, 5 ounces. So then I just added in my powdered sugar and butter that I mixed with the cream cheese. And then you're going to mix that until it's nice and incorporated. Add 1 cup of powdered sugar, mix, add your vanilla and milk, and 1 more cup of powdered sugar and mix. And then add your final 1/3 cup of powdered sugar. If it's a little bit runny, you can add more powdered sugar. That's what I ended up needing to do this day, was just adding a little bit more powdered sugar. And then you can just top it on top of your nice cooled cake. I frosted this the day of my daughter's birthday, so that's why there's a lovely shiny pink tablecloth underneath me. And again, I'm just using this offset spatula that just makes frosting cakes so much easier. And this was definitely a winner. Everyone loved it, and it makes really good leftovers too. And if it's served cold, it also tastes really good as well. Thanks for watching. Make sure you check out the description box for the recipes and some of the tools that I've used in today's video. And thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next week with a new video. Bye.